Welcome to this explainer. Okay, so every single day we're sending millions of messages, right? But how often does what we intend to say actually match what the other person hears? Honestly, it's a fascinating and sometimes completely perilous journey trying to get an idea from one brain to another. There are hidden traps literally everywhere along the way.
So you got to ask yourself, why exactly do our messages fail? Have you ever sent a text that you thought was perfectly clear, like a simple grocery instruction, only for your partner to bring home the exact wrong thing? It's incredibly frustrating. But here's the thing, it's not just random bad luck. There is actually a precise mechanism behind why our messages completely miss the mark at the finish line.
The core problem really comes down to one thing: communication barriers. Basically, these are the very real, tangible obstacles that prevent the smooth transmission of our thoughts. And they don't just, delay information. Oh no. They actively distort the meaning, they kill clarity, and they can absolutely derail your team's collaboration.
Section 1. Invisible psychological walls. Let's get right into it. Now, the most immediate obstacles we run into are physical barriers. We see these every day, right? Think about it. A blaring siren in the background while you're talking, a terrible internet connection that totally freezes your screen mid-sentence, or even just dealing with being 3 time zones apart. The message is literally blocked in the physical world before it even has a chance to reach the receiver. But then we hit perceptual barriers. It's like a giant puzzle. On one side, you have the sender's pristine, crystal clear intent. But on the other side, you've got the receiver's biases, their assumptions, and their limited awareness. This is exactly where 2 individuals can look at the exact same piece of information and interpret it completely differently. It all comes down to those unique mental filters we all use to view the world.
And compounding those mental filters are our emotional barriers. Try explaining a super delicate problem to someone who is just fuming mad. It doesn't work. Strong feelings, whether it's anger, deep-seated fear, or just mistrust, act as these massive internal walls. They completely warp both how you express a message and how it gets received. Moving on to Section 2, we're looking at societal and cultural divides.
Zooming out a bit, here is where we encounter cultural barriers. These pop up when we're dealing with differences in our traditions, values, or social norms. For example, maintaining direct eye contact might show great confidence in one culture, but it could be seen as deep disrespect in another. If we ignore these deeply ingrained differences, well, foundational misunderstandings are pretty much guaranteed for sure.
Next up, we have language barriers. This one is straightforward, but wow, is it incredibly disruptive. When you've got gaps in vocabulary, totally different grammar rules, or just varying levels of fluency, the basic mechanics of the language itself act like a brick wall. Honestly, it really doesn't matter how brilliant your idea is if the words themselves are blocking the clarity. We also see gender barriers come into play here. There's this really complex interplay between our different styles of communication and those rigid societal expectations we all face, and that dynamic can easily introduce subtle but really profound misinterpretations into what should have been a totally straightforward conversation.
Bringing it down to Section 3, interpersonal obstacles.
Okay, so interpersonal barriers, this is where a message so often just goes to die. These roadblocks come from poor relationships, a fundamental lack of trust, or, let's be honest, just really ineffective listening between 2 people. If the relationship is broken or if that trust is completely absent, even the most perfectly crafted, brilliant message is going to fall completely flat.
All right, Section 4, breaking down the barriers. Let's pivot to some solutions.
To actually remove these blocks, we have to map out specific solutions to each obstacle. For physical barriers, the deliberate effort is all about improving infrastructure, right? Fixing the faulty equipment, closing that physical distance. But for interpersonal barriers, the solution is deeply rooted in actively building trust. You've got to put in the work to strengthen those one-on-one connections. Now, when we look at our internal walls, those perceptual and emotional barriers, the strategy kind of shifts. Fostering empathy is your specific, deliberate antidote here. By actively trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes and understand their perspective, we actually reduce the power of our own biases, our own assumptions, and those overwhelming emotions. And to bridge those broader societal gaps we talked about, we really need a strategic approach. Overcoming cultural barriers means promoting actual cultural awareness. Beating language barriers? Well, that means actively enhancing our language skills to make sure things are clear. And minimizing gender differences in communication means we have to actively encourage equality. These are the deliberate efforts we need to make to smooth out interactions across diverse groups.
And that brings us to Section 5, the clear path forward.
So, what's the takeaway? By addressing these obstacles head-on, the results are just profound. Communication doesn't just happen anymore, it transforms. It becomes dramatically clearer, significantly more inclusive for everyone involved, and ultimately so much more impactful in our everyday lives.
It really all comes down to this one powerful two-part equation. Effective communication demands not only the transmission of information, but also the removal of barriers that distort meaning. Speaking your mind? Well, that's only half the job. Deliberately clearing the path for your message to land safely, that's the whole rest of the equation.
Which leads me to ask you this final question. Which barrier are you going to break today? Take a really hard look at your own interactions. Identify those invisible walls we've just mapped out together, and get out there and start tearing them down. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.